What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to The World According to Briggs, a channel that listens to its subscribers. At least the positive ones that don't leave a bunch of profanity in the comment section. Last week I asked if there was any interest in abandoned Disney parks or amusement parks in general. The overwhelming response was yes. So here we are. We'll be doing this one on parks that have been shuttered all around the country, and then we'll do one devoted to Disney parks alone, just so you know. Out of the 1,000 votes, 10 people said neither. They didn't want anything to do with amusement parks, Disney, or otherwise. I get the feeling that would have been the same number if I asked who wanted free cash. Sometimes people just want to say no to say no. Anyway, most of us love theme parks. Maybe it's the roller coasters you love, maybe it's the calmer rides you love, maybe you just love paying $13 for a churro. Who knows? Whatever the reason, theme parks are loved. That's why we feel so sad when one of them closes its doors forever. Now, I grew up in Southern California where we had Disneyland, Six Flags Magic Mountain, and Knott's Berry Farm. I would go to Six Flags and Knott's at least once a summer, and maybe Disneyland every couple of years, so I've been to these theme parks a lot. Been to a lot of them all around the country, actually, but those, a ton. We had one that closed before my time called the Pike. It was in Long Beach, California, just south of Los Angeles. It closed in 1979 due to poor attendance and the city wanting to go another direction. It'd been kind of run down by 1979. I remember my grandmother being sad when it closed down because her and my grandfather used to go there on dates. So it was kind of, a sentimental place for her. Side note to that one, when they finally tore it down and they were clearing out the haunted house, I guess, one of the wax dummies they had there, he broke open. There was actually a body inside there. I'm not even kidding. They figure he'd been there since the early 1900s. Kind of freaky. Dotted around the country are many stories like the Pike. Maybe not dead bodies in the haunted house, but, abandoned amusement parks collecting rust and graffiti. Let's see where they are. Number 10, Lake Shawnee Amusement Park, West Virginia. The Lake Shawnee Amusement Park is a defunct amusement park in Princeton, West Virginia, located along Lake Shawnee, and I bet you'll never guess where they got the name for the park. If you said it was named for a nickname they gave some kid that whines a lot, you're wrong. It was named after the lake. Opened in 1926, for over 40 years it entertained coal miners and their families, before being closed in 1966. Over those 40 years, it's rumored that only 7 employees had all their teeth. It received public attention for a total of 6 deaths that occurred on the premises during its years of operation, which led to all the urban legends about the place being haunted. The park reopened 21 years later in 1987, only to be closed again the next year after archaeologists discovered Native American artifacts, including a total of 13 skeletons, mostly of young children. As you probably already guessed, you can now take ghost tours here. Yay, capitalism! Number 9, Holy Land, USA, Waterbury, Connecticut. Holy Land, USA was an almost 20-acre theme park in Waterbury, Connecticut that was inspired by selected passages from the Bible. The park opened in 1955 and surprisingly had seen up to 40,000 visitors in a year at one point, which will seem amazing in a second. This park didn't have much of a budget for the original build or the day-to-day operation. The park consisted of a chapel, the Stations of the Cross, replica catacombs, and an Israelite village, constructed of cinder blocks, wood, and things you could find on the side of the road. I can't find anything about how much it cost to get into the park. Maybe it was free. If it was free, well, that's a miracle in itself. The owner of the theme park, John Greco, closed Holy Land, USA in 1984 with plans to improve and expand the site. But as we know, the Lord works in mysterious ways. Greco died in 1986. It went unfinished. Over the years, the land and monuments have repeatedly been the target of vandalism and parties, apparently. But on September 14th, 2014, the park rose from the dead and officially reopened to the public for the first time in 30 years with an inaugural mass and access to the park for the general public. These days, it sits abandoned, waiting to be resurrected. Number 8, Williams Grove Amusement Park, Pennsylvania. Williams Grove is an abandoned amusement park near Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. The park operated from 1850 until 2005. That's freaking amazing. 150 years? It started off when the Williams family started hosting picnics in 1850 in a small grove next to a creek just outside of Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. Within a few years, the grove was developed into a park, and 2 decades later, the park became the fairgrounds. The first rides appeared at the park around 1928. The adjacent Williams Grove Speedway half-mile track opened in 1938. Now, the park changed hands several times after World War II, and then a man named Morgan Hughes purchased the park in 1972 for $1.2 million. Several rides were relocated to Williamsburg from a defunct New Jersey amusement park, which closed the same year. Hughes operated the park through the end of 2005, and that's when the Hughes family decided they wanted to focus all their energies on the Williams Grove Speedway, which they also owned. Hughes by this time was in his mid-80s, so they just decided to close the park. They made attempts to sell the property in 2006, but they wanted someone to buy it and still operate it and maintain it. That's what they're looking for. They can never find anyone that was willing to put out that kind of effort. It's still standing today, but not operating. Now here's where it gets weird. The owners, the Hughes family, they still live at the park. Yeah, that's weird. At least that's what I read. The main attraction to the park was a classic wooden roller coaster called Cyclone. Cyclone reached a height of 65 feet and traveled at a top speed of 45 miles an hour. Unfortunately, the Cyclone closed with the rest of the park after the 2005 season. This beautiful classic wooden roller coaster is still there with vines and weather-beaten wood. The cars, though, have been returned to Fort Lee, New Jersey, where they're on display at a museum, so that's kind of cool. Number 7. The Joyland Amusement Park, Kansas. The Joyland Amusement Park was an amusement park in Wichita, Kansas. It was in continuous operation for 55 years, from June 12, 1949 to 2004. Now, they had a couple little openings and a couple days here and there, but in 2006, it was permanently closed. There's another park by the same name in Lubbock, Texas. They have nothing to do with each other. The park was founded by a man named Lester and his sons, Herbert and Harold, to serve as a home for their miniature steam locomotive that Herb had purchased in Fort Scott back in 1933. The train was part of a defunct amusement park there and was originally built by a miniature railway company. The brothers ran it for years and got out of the amusement park business in the early 70s and sold the park to Stanley and Margaret Nelson. The couple ran the park and were the ones that acquired most of the rides and made the park what it was. The park closed in 2006 and Stanley died on July 13, 2010 at the age of 87. It was once the largest theme park in Kansas and featured a wooden roller coaster and 24 other rides. With its closing, the only remaining amusement park in Kansas is Schlitterbahn in Kansas City. Like I've always said, Kansas is kind of boring. Now, that's not where the Joyland story ends. We have a little drama coming up. During this time, the park stood empty for years while the elements wore it down. You could still see some of the buildings and cracked cement from Google Earth. Now, while all this was going on, around 2006, someone noticed something missing from the storage. It was the beloved automated clown Louie. For decades, he played an organ for pretty much people that just walked by. I mean, nobody stops to watch an automated clown play an organ, but he was still loved. A police report was filed, and in 2008, the Wichita police received a tip that Damian Mays, a maintenance worker for the park, who had maintained Louie and the organ, had Louie. He denied knowing the whereabouts, and the case went cold until 2015. There was a break in the case. Organ music coming from May's house in the middle of the night tipped people off. The police came back, and Louie, who had been missing for over a decade, was found at the home of Damian Mays. Mays got 18 months for stealing Louie. When they found Louie, the Wichita Police Department had a frickin' news conference, and Louie was there. They sat him right at the table. Look at that. A reporter even asked Louie a question. The hell goes on in Wichita? Number 6, Busch Gardens, California. Now, many of you know about Busch Gardens in Tampa and Williamsburg. Did you know they had one just outside of Los Angeles? They also had one in Houston, but I remember the one in Van Nuys, California. If you grew up where I did, most of the kids had at least one story about our parents taking us to an amusement park where they got drunk and drove us home in that condition. Yeah, it happened. It wasn't as frowned upon back in the 1970s as it is now, but it happened. The park was right next to the brewery, and yes, they gave out free beer. What a great combination. Amusement park and free beer. The brewery's still there, the amusement park isn't. Long before the current Busch Gardens amusement parks, A man named Adolphus Busch, who was the co-founder of Anheuser-Busch, decided he wanted a home out west. After making barrels of money in the beer business, Busch purchased a winter home in Pasadena, California around 1900. He loved the land and he had the cash, so he turned the 36 acres around his home into a work of art with thousands of plants, statues, waterfalls, bird feeders, sweaty gardeners, and walking paths. He called it Busch Gardens. He opened up the gardens to the public in 1906, and in no time it became a major tourist attraction. Busch died in 1913. The garden and the beer lived on. As the garden gained popularity, the Pacific Electric Railway established a stop for the garden visitors. It wasn't long before Hollywood came knocking. The studios used the gardens in many films. Frankenstein in 1931, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 1931 also, The Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn, and Gone with the Wind. The 12 Oaks barbecue scene, that was in 1939. Yeah, it was filmed in Busch Gardens. Years later, Busch's widow offered the gardens to the city of Pasadena on multiple occasions for use as a public park, but the city never accepted her offer. I guess they thought it was too much of a hassle. Busch Gardens closed in 1937, and the land was later subdivided. The area is now a residential neighborhood, and some of the landscape features are still there. In 1954, a new Anheuser-Busch factory was opened in Van Nuys. The company opened the first of the modern Busch Garden parks at the site in 1966. It had boat rides, a monorail, birds, and free beer. What isn't there to love? The 17-acre amusement park was renamed Busch Bird Sanctuary in 1977 and closed 2 years later. All that's left is the old pedestrian bridge and the monorail, which has been repurposed to move kegs instead of people. It's kind of sad, I remember this one. Alright, so that is part 1 of the Abandoned Theme Park series. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Look into some of these. They got really neat backstories. I just skimmed the surface of them. Anyway, don't forget all the links below. Give the video a big thumbs up if you like what we're doing. Subscribe if you really like what we're doing here. Everybody have a great day. Be nice to each other.